Some companies believe they can replace data analysts, data scientists, or the task of some admins with data with the generative artificial intelligence. You understand from the face I did what I'm going to do in this video. In the past I did a video on this task. They wanted a data analyst to analyze the invoice and provide insights. They gave tasks, and in this case I don't agree with what they wrote, and you will understand why. And that's it. In the video you see in the description, you will notice how I did some of these tasks with the Tableau. And in this video, of course, I will use a totally different approach, that is generative artificial intelligence. Just to not take things for granted, I am inside VS Code, that is a code editor where you can install various plugins, and one of them is Klein, that I also mentioned in one of the videos. So I will use this README to create a markdown plan. It is just a different way to have a document for the task they mention. Here I used Gemini, one of the last model, at least at the recording date of the video, and we see that Klein rightly read this file, also the data that I put inside the folder, because the more the context, the better the results. Then they created the file you see here. Then I said, proceed with the plan, I agree with what you wrote. And I lied a bit. Then it created this file, and this is actually the final version, because you see, script failed, and as you probably know, these things don't go smoothly at the first time, especially if you use Python, that is a bit tricky on how the resources work. And then it executed the analysis that returned initially 2 images, something that generally I don't agree. I prefer the, understandably, dashboard approach, and we can see them by here. If you saw the previous video linked in the description, this image will look somewhat familiar. The other file is this one. Again, something a bit familiar if you saw the other video. And then it gave also this file, completely useless, you see. You notice trends, and there is a reason why the trend for the invoice amount fails. Then we get payment status distribution, a pie chart, something that I generally don't advise. Here I do advise, but it is useless because we have 2 categories, just paid and partially paid. And then we have top overdue customers, and I'm showing you all this because this is a topic that often returns in my videos. With the generative artificial intelligence, today, or more precisely, at the date of recording of this video, gives you most of the times, unless you specify in the prompt at the beginning, descriptive statistics. What are, once again, counts, sums, conditional counts, conditional sums, conditional averages, and so on. Then we got also the summary. Unfortunately, most companies want summaries in PDF, something that, again, that is something that I generally not advise, because a summary is static, like a photo. With a dashboard, instead, you can have dynamic statistics that change according to the data that change. In this case, you could say also the summary report is okay because we have static data that is in the form of an Excel. Okay, but let's go to see it. As I anticipated, because the images showed exactly that direction, the summary is a collection of descriptive statistics. You see, total of sum, count, in this part, a completely useless stuff mentioned already when seeing the trend picture. And also it specifies where to find the chart of these supposed trends. Here we have instead a conditional sum. Here an average. And here a percentage. Here we have overdue payment analysis, that is not really an analysis. Actually, let me show you with the preview that is under my face, but there is a special button. So it is more readable, as you can understand. The Markdown is convenient because it has the format style of PDFs, but it is much leaner in terms of dimension, and not only. Here we don't really see an analysis, we just identify the customer name that I hashed for privacy concerns, since it is real data that comes from a real request, not done to me. Recommendations, users, optimize payment methods. Also this one is useless. Here it is something that I find more useful. Collect and analyze over a longer period. Why I find it useful? Because it repeats what I repeat in many videos, that we need more data. But here mentions just to have more rows of data. I say to have more columns of data. That is generally something that belongs to the topic of data enrichment. If you have more columns, you can understand more the features of who don't pay, and you can also segment better. That is, you can create groups of people better. Maybe, and this is a very trivial and ironic example, people with white hair pay later than young people that still have a color in the hair. The analysis provides a fundamental understanding of the invoice dataset. No, no. Let's go on to see what happened actually in the chat with the generative artificial intelligence. You see that I did many attempts, and in part those depended on the prompts I gave. For example, notice this. And for the major part, it depended on the README and, of course, on the data. So, yes, you could replace a data analyst if you can collect data as a data analyst or data scientist, and you can prompt rightly the generative artificial intelligence. Notice that in this case, that is an interesting feature I see for this extension. we see the cost of this generative process. It is a fake cost because Gemini is free and it won't remain free for a long time, at least with the current rates. But if you divide this by the time required and you see the previous video I did on the same README, you might agree with me that it takes less time to have the same results with a dashboard creating service like Tableau.